What day is it?
It's my birthday.
It's good to share. But check you have the right privacy settings. Or someone can make a lot of money from being you.
Morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
Let us say a very good morning to Mr. Peter Hitchens. Peter, how are you doing?
Morning.
Nice to talk to you. Before we get to the royal family, let's talk a little bit about the current state of the nation. Sleazegate, as some people are calling it. I mean, you've seen your fair share of sleazy politicians over your illustrious career. What did you make of John Major's assertions at the weekend?
Well, it's rather odd for him to be getting involved, but it is a feature of almost any government of any party that obviously these things will happen. And for any political party to maintain that it will come into office and will be totally clean is absurd. Power, particularly uncontrolled and concentrated power, and power unregulated by a very vigilant media, is always going to result in forms of what can most easily be called sleaze. And people will do things for money when they have the power and when they don't think anybody is looking. Also, what Michael Kinsley, the great American journalist, always used to point out, the astonishing thing was not what was illegal, but what was legal. And it is amazing what you can do. The composition of the House of Lords is a constant source of amusement to everybody, I think. But nothing illegal has happened, and there it is.
Well, that seems to be the problem, doesn't it? Because it was just pointed out to me by a tweet from Guido Fawkes that Sir Keir Starmer, while bleating on about how corrupt he thinks Boris Johnson's government is, has also been in receipt of quite a lot of money, about 26,000 quid, for some legal work that he's been doing over the course of the last few months, and charging £250 an hour, as he's entitled to do as a lawyer. I mean, it's almost impossible to have a system that doesn't involve people making money in addition to the money they get as an MP, isn't it?
Well, it's true. There also used to be an argument saying that MPs should not really be salaried employees of the government or anybody else, and that it was no bad thing that they maintained professions and skills outside Parliament. We certainly accept this in the case of doctors. I think you have to carry on practicing to maintain their qualifications. So there can't be an iron hard rule. But then again, it's fairly obvious when someone is selling their position as an MP in return for gain, and that's always wrong. But the idea, as I say, that this is a party political issue, it fills you with despair. Frankly, whenever anybody raises the issue of sleaze or corruption in politics, you know they have nothing fundamental to say about the issue.
Right.
There is no political party which is clean, no government which is clean. If you want clean government, what you must fundamentally have is the maximum amount of scrutiny and the proper rule of law. And that's what the Victorians realised when they created actually very enviable non-political civil service. And also during that era, they strove to create a judiciary which was genuinely law-governed and try to enforce the law over and above power. And these things have, especially again since the Blair Revolution, these things seem to me to have weakened. The civil service has been heavily politicised. It was politicised a bit by Thatcher, but much more by Blair and Campbell. And the judiciary also seems to me to have been heavily politicised following the introduction of the Judicial Appointments Commission, which has completely changed the nature of our courts. So these things are not. These are very important developments, and they take us away from the attempt to build an impartial state or an impartial judiciary of the 19th century. They're not the same thing as sleaze or corruption, but they are, in my view, menaces to freedom. But if you want to make politics about sleaze, then beware, because whichever party you lead, sooner or later, some senior member of your own party will seriously let you down, because that's human nature.
Yes.
It's dead for me politically. It has no resonance, because it never actually means anything profound or fundamental.
No. There's no doubt, though, is there, that we've gone sort of slightly down the American route, where politicians who get into politics and get quite high up inside the political sphere seem to become quite wealthy, which is exactly
I'm
what
afraid
happens
we have,
in
but
America.
a lot of that wealth in Britain tends to come after they've left frontline politics.
Yeah.
So it always irritates me when people say such and such a person is paid more than the Prime Minister. I say, well, so what? By the standards of chief executives, Prime Ministers are paid very badly. The financial rewards for Prime Ministers come after they leave the office, when they're showered with money and under virtually no supervision at all. And that's where the money comes from. And they accept the low salary and the pokey flat in Downing Street in return for the knowledge that when it's all over, they can become millionaires.
Yeah.
No, it's not. But in our politics, it tends to be that you get rich after you leave, rather than while you're actually in highs.
Unless you're Peter Mandelson, of course, who seem to manage both. But apparently, though, it would appear that if Boris Johnson was leading a company, if he was a CEO, I'm not sure he would be able to do what he's doing currently, which seemingly is to surround himself with people that all agree with him, tell him how great he is, and advise him to do things which have now made him as unpopular as he has ever been.
Well, I don't know about that. I think some companies are worse than others, don't you?
Well, that's true too, yeah. But inevitably the shareholders will make a decision based upon the performance of the chief exec, and if the chief exec keeps doing the kinds of things that Boris is doing, surely he wouldn't last long.
Well, I don't know. I think that the extraordinary story of modern British politics is the success of Mr. Johnson, that he has actually become something quite unique. And the reason for this seems to be very simple. We owe this Prime Minister to Ian Hislop and all the other people involved in Have I Got News for You, who created him as a public figure who has a direct relation through television with large parts of the British public who don't care about any other of the projections of him in biographies or by political writers. They think they know him, and in very large numbers they like him. This may indeed be a grave mistake, but it's the fact. And this is we have a Prime Minister who's been wholly created by television fame, and also by having an engaging personality and a strong sense of humour, which appeals to people above and beyond politics. I think it's very, very hard for anyone to attack him. The other thing, of course, which is Harriet Harman made this very clever point, I thought, on the World This Weekend yesterday on Radio 4, that he acts increasingly as a presidential politician, as if he was actually head of state as well as head of government. But that's something he got from his time as mayor of London, which is London I regard as being one of the countries of the United Kingdom now, and it's a republic. Yeah, it has an elected head of state, and he was it, and he learned to act like that there, and it gave him certain attitudes towards politics, which he's carried into Downing Street and gets away with. So if people mess around with the Constitution, as New Labour so very much did in the late 1990s, and people say, oh, well, that's just boring old constitutional stuff. It isn't boring old constitutional stuff. It's a deep change in the rules about how we're governed, and we're reaping the rewards, or rather non-rewards of it now.
But this most recent U-turn on the whole business of the standards body and whether or not it should be disbanded, whether or not Owen Paterson should have had an opportunity to appeal, it seems to me just to be the latest kind of effort by Boris Johnson to do anything that he wants to do.
Well, maybe. The other explanation of it is if you'd read nothing but the Daily Telegraph for the whole of the 10 days or so before the Owen Paterson vote, you'd had a completely different view from the rest of the country. Yeah. And one does sometimes get the impression that the cabinet and particularly the Prime Minister do read the Daily Telegraph and not much else. And there you are. That's how they got themselves into that particular corner. But that was just a mistake. Yeah. And what happens in politics is you live in this tiny little world where everybody you meet believes the same thing and agrees with you and likes you or pretends to do so. And so nobody says, actually, no, Prime Minister, this is a daft thing to do. Yeah. But fortunately, I mean, I don't know how long this is going to last or how big it's going to be. I wouldn't like to predict. But fortunately, they did at least realize immediately after that they had made a terrible mistake. And I say, fortunately for them, it's not my concern, they then reversed, as they absolutely should have done, because they'd done something stupid. I have to say, when I was talking to people about this last week, and they said how terrible it was, that's just probably, if John Major had been involved, he would have carried on. And of course, then up pops John Major saying he would have been better. So I don't know.
But the trouble is, though,
tiresome figures in British politics. So I didn't enjoy his government from any aspect at all. And I always remember him saying that when you're back was to the wall, you should turn around and fight. And it sticks in my mind as an image of John Major as a politician battering his fists against the wall.
Yes, there's an unfortunate use of the words there.
It would just, I mean, we've all done it, but it just seemed so John Major.
Yeah, it very much did. And also he's kind of reinvented himself as some kind of elder statesman, forgetting that when he was Prime Minister, he wasn't exactly, one of the greatest leaders the world had ever seen. And nobody can forget the whole back to basics fiasco, where it seemed like every 5 minutes yet another cabinet minister was falling down due to some moral outrage or other.
Yeah, I think he would say in his defence with some reason that back to basics wasn't supposed to be about sex.
No,
but there it was. That's what it says. So many things aren't supposed to be about sex, but turn out to be, and he was caught on that one. But it wasn't by any means the worst. I mean, the wild pursuit of the exchange rate mechanism was the thing that really did for him. And there were lots of people saying, "Oh, please don't do this." But no, he would have it. And there we are, and he impaled himself upon it.
Yes, but you're right to say that the problem now in politics, as in much of our kind of society, is that people only surround themselves with fellow travellers, that they only ever hear the same story every single time. I mean, I was saying earlier today, I don't think there's anyone inside government right now who knows what life is like in the rest of Britain outside of London. I mean, you say London is like its own country. It kind of is, because it's very much now a law unto itself. It's full of people who probably voted more for the Labour Party than for the Tory Party. It's full of people who want climate change to be very, very high on the agenda. The rest of the country, I'm not so sure. And it takes us on to what you said about the royal family.
Well, yes, it does. But just a small point about London. I think that a lot of the explanation of what the Johnson government is like goes back to his time when to become mayor of London, he more or less had to adopt the politics, though not the personality, of Ken Livingstone. Yeah. Because that was the voter base he had to appeal to, and he became a very left-wing person, and hired as an advisor Munira Mirza, who's still very close to him, who's very much mixed up with the Spiked Online lot. And it's this extraordinary belief among the British left-wing unintelligentsia, that Johnson is some kind of rabid Tory who wants to grind the faces of the poor, could not be further from the truth. He is Blair, but Blair with an Etonian gloss on. Yeah. As with Blair, they should be more pleased about what they've got. He certainly isn't what I want.
Right. Well, if Blair had not been involved in Iraq, and I know it's a big if, because that obviously made everything incredibly different. I mean, Blair, Cameron and Johnson, therefore, three very similar characters in terms of the way that they approached the business of politics. Three very centrist kind of types with a bit of a left-wing bent, although you may argue with that. Maybe that's what the country wants if they keep getting in, these people.
Well, they think they want it because they don't understand what's going on. The interesting thing is the person you left out there, of course, was the man in the middle who didn't fit with that, who was Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown, who actually had some conviction.
Well, yeah, and also actually was in many ways far more conservative, certainly, than David Cameron.
Right.
Not difficult as a task, but he was. So yes, it is fascinating. No, the country think they want it because what one of the things that Blairism does is it sets out what's called manipulative populism. It sets out a number of things which it claims it's going to do. Blair was going to sort out the schools, he didn't. Blair was going to sort out crime, he didn't. Blair was going to sort out everything and didn't. Right. What he was really doing was engaging, or rather his government was engaging, in a gigantic social, moral, and economic revolution while nobody was looking. And people thought they liked it, but they didn't like the consequences, but they continued to think that the people at the head of it were engaging and appealing, up until, as you say, the Iraq disaster, and they had to get a new Blair because he was too discredited by that. And they found one now. David Cameron wasn't really up to much as the heir to Blair, but Johnson is a much better heir to Blair if that's what you want. Of course, I don't want it, so it's not great.
It's not really for you, no. No, I mean, I actually said that Boris Johnson makes David Cameron look a bit like an ideologue, though, because Boris literally doesn't believe in anything, it seems to be.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he does, but what it is, we've yet to find out. But please let's not go on about David Cameron.
No, let's not. Yeah, let's move on to your piece about the royal family, because I, like you, was rather disturbed to see everyone. By the way, we've just been up to COP26. One of our correspondents has been chased into a disabled toilet on the grounds that she's been asking whether there should be a referendum on net zero, and they don't want her to be able to speak to anybody in the press area. So,
okay, will she get out?
Well, she thinks they're knocking. Last we heard, they were sort of knocking on the door, trying to extricate her. I think they're trying to kick her out of the whole event because now there is no room for debate, as they quite openly say. You know, everybody.
The debate is over. The debate is over. It's the slogan. It's all over. There's nothing left to say. And if you raise any doubts, then you are more or less a thought criminal who should be ejected from public life and told to shut up.
Yeah.
And there it is. Whether they're as right as they think they are seems to me still to be open to question. Just simply to say, hang on a minute, we got this right. I get called a climate change denier. I don't deny climate. It's evident to me. I've lived long enough to see that the climate in this country has grown significantly warmer in my time. The winters are nothing like as cold as they used to be. It's obvious something's going on, but then you move on to much more profound questions. First of all, what is the cause of this? How long will it last? How intense will it be? Can we actually do anything about it? And that's a much mistier area of inquiry in which it's entitled to ask at the very least questions. The other thing, as Lord Lawson, Nigel Lawson has often said, is the response that we're following or pretending to follow the wisest one? Wouldn't there be as much sense in waiting to see what actually was happening? Say, for instance, the sea levels did begin to rise, and take precautions against that as it happened, rather than spending so much money on crippling our economy now. And the other question, of course, is what we're doing actually, in any case, happening? Is our supposed it's self-denial on coal even real? The fact is that so much of the stuff which we import into this country, because we no longer have any industry that makes things, is manufactured in China by factories powered by coal, including, and this is the supreme paradox, the windmills which we import from China to make intermittent power with them. These are made in Chinese factories powered by coal-fired power stations. So the whole thing is a bit of a pretense from that. And even if we shut down every single carbon-producing item in our generating catalogue, so that all our power was produced by wind and sunshine, and somehow stored in batteries in between. Even if we did that, it would be of nothing compared to the gigantic expansion of coal burning currently going on in China. So it doesn't even have any practical effect. But to question any of this is to be treated like a medieval heretic, except that they can't actually yet burn me at the stake.
No. Oh, that'll be soon.
I think their lips are the prospect of doing so.
Oh, I think so. They absolutely love that because, as you say, they now talk about how it's a climate emergency and you can't wait until something happens because by then it will be too late. And then in the same breath, they say it's never too late. And you go, well, it can't be both. It's either too late or it's not.
I won't name the guy. He's an old colleague of mine from provincial journalism days. So one of the big climate media people who talks a lot, and he says that it's all too late anyway, that we missed our chance, that if we were going to stop it, there's been far too little done. And it's a respectable point of view if you take his position, and he's very serious about it. Now, you don't actually hear them say that very much in public, because if they said it in public, that all these efforts have actually failed on their own terms, then the public will say, well, in that case, why do we continue to do these things?
Yes.
Why are we making ourselves suffer? The thing has so many doubts about it, and that's, I think, why they're so afraid of doubt. You know as well as I do, you disagree with somebody, I disagree with you. When that happens, the thing to do is to go to the facts and the logic and see which of us turns out right. But you never get that with the climate change people in public. Always you get the finger pointed at you as if you're in a remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. A sort of scream emerging, denier, 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 no, and fury. The absolute fury, which always comes from people who are deeply unsure of their own position. I don't even want to take part in this debate. It's never been one which particularly attracts me, but I am annoyed by the way in which it's become an orthodoxy. Yeah. This is why I got so cross about the recruitment of the royal family. And look, when this country is at war with a dangerous enemy, then obviously we all have to pull together, and there has to be national unity, and the royal family stands for that. And I suppose that maybe one or two points at which you would say that the unity has to be so total that the royal family can openly espouse support for it. And there wasn't any question during World War II that the king and queen were very much behind the war effort. But outside that, when you're not in a national emergency, I always thought that the view was that the royal family should retain political impartiality, and that was part of its job, and one of the reasons why we could respect it. And this just seems to have gone right out of the window. There were little signs of it, again, early in the New Labour era, but it's become so intense. And in the past few days, just during COP26, all three generations of the royal family have plunged in, taking one side on this. And I just think, for me, that's it. I can't really support the House of Windsor anymore. I'm not a Republican and will not ever be one. I believe in constitutional monarchy, but we need a different monarchy from this one if they've so far forgotten themselves as to become, in my view, partisan. I
think that's right. And also, you're right to say you don't necessarily want to take part in the ins and outs of the debate as such, but it's beginning to cost us money, and they're starting to use it as an excuse to tax us more, and therefore we must kind of talk up against it, surely.
Well, I think we do, and the other, not just tax us more, but as I said in my Sunday column, this is very like the one-sided disarmament that I used to be against during the Cold War. What we do is we actually strip away our strength. We close down our major industries, our ability to produce our own power. We cripple our own economy, while our principal rival and the country which is likely to be the supreme power on the planet within 100 years carries on burning coal and expanding its industries while we go under. What is the point of that? How can we possibly justify it as the lowering of our standards of living, which is going to follow, will be very unpopular. But whether people will associate it with what's going on now, I don't know, because so often the problem is that people don't connect the things which happen to them to the decisions which brought them about. But this my favourite example of that, of course, is the belief that all this health and safety stuff comes from human rights. And it doesn't. It comes from a Thatcher major legislation introducing ambulance chasing lawyers into this country, which is one of the major political disasters of modern times that nobody knows about, so they don't put two and two together.
No, absolutely. Fascinating as ever, Peter. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, Men on Sunday, columnist there with the whole row round of all sorts of issues, all sorts of ideas and all sorts of brilliant pieces of philosophy, which is why we like to have Peter on, of course. We've got lots more to do. This is Mike Graham on Talk Radio with the Veterans Railcard. If you've served at least a day in the armed forces, you could say